Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rate the worst card designs of 1991. Now, I've already done two videos prior to this where I've looked at the baseball and basketball cards and the football and hockey cards, the worst cases of both of those, because in 1991, that was the first really big explosion in card manufacturing, the cards that were available. We saw a decent explosion in 1989, and in 1990, that was primarily hockey where they had a huge explosion. But by 1991, it was across the board. Hockey didn't really feel it because of what had happened the previous year. And for basketball, it's just one more set, which had been happening every single year. For basketball, it was really 1992 when they had an explosion. But the number of brands that all of a sudden hit the market in 1991 was pretty impressive. And so I just didn't really feel that it was right to look at all of the card brands in just one shot because of how much there was that was right on the fringe. Unlike in the decades, when you look at an entire decade, most of the cards in the middle are pretty boring, so there's not a lot to talk about with them. In this case, I think there's a lot more. So I wanted to take the opportunity with the other two videos to really look at a more expansive run of the different card designs that we had, and then focus in this case of, okay, now at the end of the day, really what are the worst cards? And so that's what I'm looking at here, and I'm starting off with a card that I can't let off the hook, which is Bowman Baseball. Now, I'm not a big fan of Bowman hockey, and Bowman football's workable. But the advantage that those two have is that the card backs actually aren't that bad. But in baseball, the big problem they have there is they have the stat nerd stats on the back, which, look, there's a place for it, there's an audience for it, and that's great. If people are into the stat nerd stats, I got no problem with that. For the rest of us, it's difficult to work with, and let's face it, after a couple of years, stat nerd stats don't hold up too well because they are a picture in time. They don't really have the duration that you really want to have with statistics on cards. So, and on top of that, it just looks terrible. I mean, it really does. So that's a big problem where the card back looks horrible. But on the card front, the whole problem that I have here is how incredibly forgettable the card is. It's weird because when I think back, 89, okay, that's easy to remember. It's the tall card, it's got the signature. 1990, yeah, no problem, I remember. 1991, my head immediately thinks of the 1990 card design. 92, I remember what that's like. 93, I remember what that's like. 1991 is the one where every time I look at it, every time I go, oh yeah, they did that. That's not good because especially I think that this is the best Bowman card design of the first 5 years. And the fact that the best card design is the one I can't remember is really unfortunate. It doesn't read with the strength that it really needed to. So I can't let it off this list, but I have to admit the card front actually is pretty decent. So, I'm kind of torn, but I cannot let off the hook my number 5 entry, which is Ultra Baseball. Now, Ultra Baseball is another great example of boring and easily forgettable. The problem here is in football, I think it works. I think it works decently. Not great. It's not a good card design, but it does work with the football designs. To me, it's almost like they were designing it for football, and then all of a sudden somebody went, oh, whoa, dude. We got baseball coming up. We got to get these cards out for baseball. And they just rushed through some stuff together, got it out the door. The cards don't have any strength to the images. That's the big problem. And the reason it's a big problem is because the card design is so bleak. The card design really is the problem. And so you need the image to save the card. And in baseball, the image does not save the card. It's a tragedy when a card needs the image to save it. On the card back, I almost like the card back. Almost. It doesn't quite work. Football, they did a much better job. In this case, all the pieces are there, but they hadn't quite put them all together in a way that worked, which is weird because Flir had been doing this for inserts leading up to this, so they knew what to do. They just didn't quite pull it off. So on the card front, it's just boring, bland, and a huge disappointment for a card that's supposed to compete with Upper Deck. On the card back, I can't even give them credit for trying. I really don't know what happened with these cards. But at least the card isn't actually unlikable. It's just super boring and easily forgettable. The other ones on this list, well, a few of the other ones on this list cannot be forgotten, starting with my number 4, which is Wildcard. Now, to be honest, I actually kind of like these cards, not in like I think these cards are good, but I've lived with these cards for so many years and I know how to see them. So I have to acknowledge that for me, in my heart, and the way I experience these cards, I give them a bit of a free pass. I would actually put these at 5, not 4. But I also have to admit, it's not a great card design, and frankly, there are some people who feel that this should be at number 1, and I get why they feel that. But I would like to keep this further back because, like I said, I know how to see it, and the first advantage these cards have is that the printing quality on the card front is actually really, really good. The way that the whole card is built is good. Now on the back, they got some problems with the quality of the images, and while I like the fade on the back, I don't like the detail, the actual information on the back. I'm not saying that this card is this gem that you just need to look at and give it a chance. Not at all. But I do know how to see the card, and what I really understand is the images do look crisp and sharp, and with that high gloss, they come through great. The problem, ironically, is that the border gets in the way. The border disrupts the ability to see the image, which is never good. So when the card design gets in the way of the image, that's a big problem. And it's very much like the problem with Ultra, but in the case of Ultra, it's a liability because it's boring and bland. In this case, it's overpowering. And so it's not, the problem this card has is it has all the potential, it's done all the things, it's just that the design they went with was a big mess. I don't know why they've done this. I've always wondered why they went with it, why they got so carried away in the card design, but they did, and it didn't quite succeed. But I do think that I am very confident in the fact that there are 3 cards that I see as being worse. And the number 3 card, the one just in front of this, for me, it's Stadium Club in hockey specifically. And it comes from the very same issue I have with the image in Wildcard, where in Wildcard, the images read beautifully. They're crisp. They're well chosen. The images tend to have really good interest to them. You know who the player is, or if you don't know who the player is, you're caught up in the action and you're reading the story of the image, and you know who in that story is the player you're going for. In the case of Stadium Club, they went borderless, which is a bold move to make. This was a very innovative card. It was a very, very impressive card. The technology was cutting edge. Unfortunately, Topps, however, was not at the level that they were trying to strive for. I mean, for crying out loud, in Topps as well as in Bowman, they were still using the fluffy cardboard. They wouldn't make a really firmly pressed cardboard until 1992. Stadium Club, this was too much of a leap for them. They had all the technological intent, they just didn't have the technological access. They needed to make a different step than they did. And unfortunately for Stadium Club, that was where it really fell short. It's a great card in terms of it has great use of the landscape. It has gold foil on it, phenomenal. It has high gloss on the front. All of that is great, but you have to have an image that works with it. Now in football, a common story is that the football images tend to work better than other sports. It's just the nature of the way the images are, the lighting, the surroundings around the player. Football card images are, on average, more successful. There's a lot more flexibility for the card designer, so you can get away with a lot. When you get into hockey, that's arguably the hardest. First off, the camera is shooting through glass because you're not having a cameraman out on the ice. So you already have a disadvantage. You really got to work hard to make sure that these images come across. And Topps wasn't there at all. And so now you have poor images on average with busy backgrounds with a company that had no idea how to properly select images, along with a printing technique that didn't have the kind of acuity that these large landscape images would really need. It was a train wreck of a situation, and in hockey, that was the worst place. Baseball had problems. Football they got away with it in football, but in hockey, this was ground zero. This was a terrible realization of what they tried to do. And to me, the fact that the images are better with Wildcard is why I have it at 4, and this is at 3. So now that we've talked about the quality of images, let's talk about the quality of thinking through the whole card design, which is why for number 2, I've got Flir Baseball. And I know a lot of people are shocked that this is all the way back at 2. I think it's a good card. I think that the way that a lot of these images work, it reads really well. The card design has all the things they need in it, but oh my word, that's so much yellow. There is so much yellow on this card. In 1992, I believe that there was a major shortage of yellow dye worldwide because of how much yellow Flir used on these cards. If you look on an individual basis, the cards actually look pretty decent. It's not that bad. When you get a couple of these cards, boy, it gets bad in a hurry, and then you get a whole set or a big pile of cards, and it is, oh wow, you suddenly need to wear sunglasses. I would love to show you more than one card on screen, but if I did that, it would probably crack the glass of the screen you're looking through. So you're welcome for me not doing that. One card will be enough. It's rough, but again, it's actually a pretty decent card overall. I would have this up more toward the best cards rather than the worst cards if it was just about any other color than this incredibly strong yellow. So yeah, it's rough, but the reason that I have this at number 2 and not at number 1 is to go back to the image quality, the full bleed, all of that with Proset Platinum. Now, Proset Platinum has always fascinated me because I've always been a fan of Proset. I've really loved the way that they worked with their card designs. 92 was kind of rough, but setting that aside, for the most part, I've always thought that Proset did a good job. Except with Platinum, this was a case where I don't know what they were thinking. They tried too hard, and it really did fall apart. And that's unfortunate. In football, they kind of made it work. But then again, they were a football card company. They had a deal with the NFL so that they could choose any image that the NFL had the rights to, which means they really had no excuse. They could get any great image. Every single card for football had to have a great image. If there was a great shot out there, they needed to be able to find it. Hockey wasn't necessarily the same way, and so in the case of hockey cards, it was a lot easier for them to fall short. And so the very advantage that they had in football that allowed them to get away with a borderless card, in hockey it didn't work out that way. And so they have card images where the image itself is kind of boring. Stadium Club already had super busy images. Well, Platinum had pretty much the same issue. But then you also have images that don't have good contrast, or if they do have good contrast, you can't follow the story of who the player is to look at. When I look at these cards, to me they look like cheap promo cards from somebody who's just trying to get started as a card company, or just kind of some giveaways that are, to me, it doesn't look like a professional card set. Even Pro Line looked like professional cards. These ones don't. And so to me, that's the cardinal sin. The images are bad and the cards don't look professional. And if that's the case, you have succeeded in failing in every possible way. Even 1991 Flir Baseball is able to succeed in looking like a card and working like a card. It may give you serious retinal strain, but at least it works as a card. To me, these cards, the Platinum cards in hockey, it's always been a why did Proset bother? They should have just not bothered with Platinum. So that is, to me, that's the worst card of 1991. Obviously, I know that I know I'm not alone in that, but I know that there are a lot of people who are going to have a difference of opinion. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm really curious about where people, how people think about where I have these on the list. Definitely let me know. I am going to be looking at the best of. I'm going to do the same thing where I break it down and then I do a third video where I combine it together. So that'll be coming up as well. So definitely check that out. And if you haven't seen this whole family of rankings, I've done everything from the 1940s all the way through to today, or all the way through to 1991, I should say. So check those out if you haven't had a chance. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Yeah, thank you very much for watching.